What is the main advantage of a magneto ignition system over a battery ignition system for an aircraft reciprocating engine? A magneto has its own source of electrical energy and is not dependent upon the battery. What is an all-weather spark plug? A shielded spark plug that has a recess in the shielding in which a resilient grommet on an ignition lead forms a watertight seal. What is meant by reach of a spark plug? The length of the threads on the spark plug that screw into the cylinder head. What is the difference between a hot spark plug and a cold spark plug? A hot spark plug has a long path for the heat to travel between the nose core insulator and the spark plug shell. In a cold spark plug, the heat has a shorter distance to travel, and the spark plug operates cooler than a hot spark plug. What is the advantage of fine wire spark plugs over a massive electrode spark plug? Fine wire spark plugs have a firing end that is more open than of a massive electrode spark plug. The open firing end allows the gases to contain lead to be purged from the spark plug so they will not form solid lead contaminants. Why is it important that the spark plugs be kept in numbered holes in a tray when they are removed from an engine? Spark plugs tell a good deal about the internal condition of the cylinders from which they are taken. By knowing the cylinder from which spark plug came, the mechanic can take the proper action when a spark plug indicates such conditions as detonation or overheating. Why is it important that a torque wrench always be used when installing spark plugs in an aircraft engine? If the spark plugs are not put in tight enough, there is a possibility of a poor seal. If they are put in too tight, there is a danger of cracking the insulation or damaging the threads on a spark plug or cylinder. What kind of gauge should be used to measure an electrode gap in an aircraft spark plug? A round wire gauge. What is a shower of sparks ignition system? An ignition system that uses an induction vibrator to send pulsating DC into a set of retard breaker points on one of the magnetos. This provides a hot retarded spark for starting the engine. What is an impulse coupling and how does it work? An impulse coupling is a spring-loaded coupling between a magneto shaft and the drive gear inside the engine. When the engine is rotated for starting, the impulse coupling locks the magnet so it cannot turn. The spring in the coupling winds up as the crankshaft continues to turn, and when the piston is near top center, the coupling releases and spins the magnet, producing a hot retarded spark. What are three distinct circuits in a magneto system? A magnetic circuit, a primary electrical circuit, and a secondary electrical circuit. What are the advantages of a solid-state magneto? No mechanical parts that wear, higher energy spark at low speeds, and no reoccurring inspection requirements. What is the purpose of a FADEC system? FADC, Full Authority Digital Electronic Control, is a digital electronic fuel control for a gas turbine engine that is functioning during all engine operations, hence full authority. It includes EEC, Electronic Engine Control, and functions with the flight management computer. FADEC schedules the fuel to the nozzles in such a way that prevents overshooting power changes and over temperature conditions. FADEC furnishes information to the ICAST. Kind of electric starting system is used on many of the smaller turbine engines. A starter generator. Why are air turbine starters superior to electric starters for large turbine engines? They are lightweight for the torque they produce. Where does an air turbine starter get its air for starting the engine on a jet transport airplane? From an APU, GPU, or from running engine? From an APU, GPU, or a running engine. What prevents too high an air pressure from overspeeding an air turbine starter? The air shutoff and regulating valve. Where does the air turbine starter get its lubricating oil? It has a self-contained lubricating system with the oil held in the starter housing. What device in an air turbine starter warns an aviation mechanic if there are any metal chips or particles in the oil? Magnetic chip detectors warn of any metal contamination in the oil. What is the function of the capacitor in a magneto? The capacitor minimizes arcing at the breaker points and it speeds up collapse of the primary current as the breaker points open. What happens in a magneto ignition system when the ignition switch is placed in the off position? The primary circuit is connected to ground. What is checked when a magneto is internally timed? Internally timing a magneto consists of adjusting the breaker points so they will open at the instant the rotating magnet is in E-gap position and the distributor rotors is in the position to direct the high voltage to cylinder number 1. In what position should the ignition switch be placed when using a timing light on the magnetos? In both positions. What is the E-gap in magneto timing? The E-gap angle is the position of the rotating magnet where the primary current flowing in the magneto coil is the greatest. The breaker points open when the rotating magnet is in the E-gap position. What malfunction in the ignition system would cause an aircraft reciprocating engine to continue to run after the ignition switch is placed in the off position? The ignition switch is not grounding the magneto primary circuit. What type of ignition system is used on most turbine engines? High intensity, intermittent duty, capacitor discharge ignition systems. How many igniters are used with most turbine engines? 2. What are the two types of ignition systems used in turbine engines? High voltage systems and low voltage systems. With which type of turbine engine ignition system is a glow plug igniter used? A low voltage system. How is the strength of the magnet in a magneto checked? The magneto is put on a test stand and rotated at specific speed. The breaker points are held open and the primary current is measured. The strength of the magnet determines the amount of primary current. In what position is the magnet in a magneto when the greatest change in flux density in the coil core takes place? It is a few degrees beyond its neutral position. When it is in this position, the breaker points open and the primary current is interrupted. The flux change in the coil core is the greatest. In what position is the magnet in the magneto when the breaker points begin to open? In its E-gap position, just a few degrees beyond its neutral position. What happens when the start switch of a turbine engine with a starter generator is placed into the start position? Current flows into a starter relay, which closes and actuates the ignition exciter. Current flows through the series motor coils of the starter generator and rotates the engine until it starts. What happens when the start switch for a turbine engine with a starter generator is placed in the run position? The starter relay opens, shutting off the current to the ignition exciter and the motor windings in the starter generator. The generator field relay is closed, connecting the voltage regulator to the starter generator. The output of the generator flows to the bus through the generator circuit breaker. What is indicated if the starter relay chatters rather than locks in when the start switch is placed in the start position? The battery voltage is too low to supply enough current to hold the relay engaged. What is the purpose of the shear section in an air turbine drive shaft? If the ratchet mechanism fails to release, the engine drives the starter to a speed higher than its design speed. The shear section will break and disconnect the starter from the engine.